Be'ezras Hashem, today's daf is Masechta Shavuos Daf Chav Daled, number 24. Here we go. Hi, Louis, we just began. Okay, today's daf is Masechta Shavuos Daf Chav Daled. And let me just take you back to the Mishnah, which is on Daf Chav Beis Amud Beis, where there the Mishnah says a seemingly contradiction. The Mishnah says, Shvuah shalai eichel. A man says, I swear I'm not going to eat. And he ate foods that are not appropriate to eat. So the Gemara understood this to mean, for example, treifus. He ate nevela. So Potter, he's not in violation of his oath. But then the Mishnah says, Shvuah shalai eichel. The guy says, swear I'm not going to eat. And then it says, V'achal neveos treifus, shkatzer ramasim, chayev. That if you did indeed eat neveos and treifus, you are liable for the oath. So the Mishnah has an inherent contradiction. Rab Shimon Paita. Rab Shimon says, you're potter. Hi, Steve, we just began. So we're discussing over here that the Mishnah on the Chav Beis Amud Beis has an inherent contradiction. First, the Mishnah says that if you swear that you're not going to eat, and you ate foods that are not edible, so the Gemara understood that meant to be nevelos and treifus. You ate nevelos and treifus, so then potter, you're not liable because you had a mind. I swear I'm not going to eat kosher food, and you ate nevelos and treifus. You are not liable. Then the Mishnah says, Shvuah shalai eichel. If a man says, I swear I'm not going to eat, and then indeed eats nevelos and treifus, he's chayev. He is liable. So that's an inherent contradiction. Only Rab Shimon says you're potter. So that's the contradiction that the Gemara is dealing, and we are holding Daf Chav Gimel Amud Beis, and about 12 lines from the bottom. So the Gemara says, Hagufa Kasha, there's an inherent contradiction in the Mishnah. Amrit, you say, you say in the Mishnah, the beginning of the Mishnah says, if you eat, you swear you're not going to eat. And you eat foods that are not edible. And drink drinks that are not supposed to be drunk. So the Gemara understood that you ate nevelos and treifus. Potter, you're not liable. So fine. Because the shvuah is, I swear I'm not going to eat kosher food. So therefore, you're not liable if you eat nevelos and treifus. Tani, and then the Mishnah says, shvuah shaloi oichal, v'achal nevelos and treifus, shvuah that I'm not going to eat. And then you eat nevelos and treifus, shkatzim u'masim, chayiv, you are liable. So the Gemara asked the question, my shenor reisha the pato, my shenor seifa the chayiv. Why in the beginning of the Mishnah, we say that you're not liable, and in the end of the Mishnah, we say you are liable. So the Gemara says, Holoi Kasha. That's not so difficult. We could resolve it. Reisha b'stap. Reisha is you didn't specify. In other words, the beginning of the Mishnah, you said, Shvuah shloi oichel. I swear I'm not going to eat. So you probably meant you're not going to eat kosher food. So if you eat non-kosher food, neveos and treifus, you're not liable. The Seifa and the end of the Mishnah, b'mefarish. You said, I swear I'm not going to eat neveos and treifus. So then, if you eat neveos and treifus, you are liable. There's a big problem with that. Mefarish, if the Sefer of the Mishnah is talking about you expressly said that you're not going to eat neveos and treifus, namagufi tiksha. That's also an inherent problem. Amai, why are you liable? Mushba mehar Sinaihu. You already sworn from Har Sinai that you are sworn from Har Sinai that you're not going to eat neveos and treifus. So once you already have a shavua from Har Sinai when you were born, before you were born, you swore you're going to keep the uphold the mitzvahs. So another shavua cannot take effect. We learned that many times. That once you have one shavua, you cannot take another shavua on top of that. So how does that work? How does the end of the Mishnah say that if you swear you're going to eat neveos and treifus, you're going to have a shvuah? Answers the Gemara, Rav Shmuel Rabbi Yochanan Amru. Rabbi Yochanan said that the Mishnah is bekoil dvarim mutarim and dvarim huasurim. You said like this: shvuah that I'm not going to eat nevelis, and you said I'm not going to eat kosher food. So you put it all together. So now, by saying something like that, so since your shvuah takes effect on the kosher food, in this case, it would take effect even on the nevelis. That's called in koilo, inclusionary. Once it includes something that didn't have a shvua, like kosher food, so then it'll include even non-kosher food. That's why it's an effective shvua. Rav Shlokish says like this, another answer, that really the shvua will not affect something that really, minat Torah, a person is not osir on less than a kazayas of nevela. Okay? So minat Torah, you can eat less than a kazayas of nevela. So the shvua was on less than a kazayas. How do you get a shvua on less than a kazayas? It cannot be possible. If in the shvua you said, I swear I'm not going to eat less than a kazayas of nevela, according to Rabbanan, who say that in order to have an oichel to take effect on less than a kazayas, you have to say so. Even if you didn't say so, according to Rabbi Kiva, that a person, when by just saying shvua shloy oichel nevelas, he's adding that I swear I'm not going to eat less than a kazayas of nevela. So since Minat Torah, it was permitted to eat less than a kazayas, and you added in a shvua that I'm not going to eat less than a kazayas, so then shvua takes effect. So we have two terutzim of how the shvua in the Mishnah takes effects. One is Rabbi Yochanan, and one is Rosh Lakish. So the Gemara says, Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan Rosh Lakish. It's very understandable why Rabbi Yochanan did want to say like Rosh Lakish. The Moikel law masnisa kedivrei hakoyah. Rabbi Yochanan has an easy way that it doesn't open up into the machlokes of Rabbi Kiva or Rabbi Banan, whether you actually said less than a kazayas or didn't say less than a kazayas. Rabbi Yochanan has an easy way that the reason why the shvua takes effect is because, and everybody agrees to this idea called shvua sakoilel, that you said, I swear I'm not going to eat kosher food and non-kosher food in nevelas. So that works according to everyone. So that's why Rabbi Yochanan felt that his answer is much better. El Rosh Lakish, my tama le'amak Rabbi Yochanan. Why didn't he agree with Rabbi Yochanan's idea that the shvua is taking effect? Because the guy said, I swear I'm not going to eat nevelas and kosher food. On Malach, he will tell you there's a problem with Rabbi Yochanan's answer. Ki amrin is a koil. When do we say iser in the inclusionary iser? We go like this: Amid Aleph, iser haba me'elav, an iser that comes by itself. Then we say a prohibition that comes by itself. Then we say that includes it includes something that was already aser. For example, on Yom Kippur, you're not allowed when Yom Kippur comes, you're not allowed to eat kosher food and nevelas. Nevelas was after Erev Yom Kippur. So if a person eats nevela on Yom Kippur, so Rabbanan hold that you chayv a chatas. Why? You violated Yom Kippur. Nevela was also an Erev Yom Kippur, but since Yom Kippur acids on, it includes kosher food, any kosher food, you're not allowed to eat any food on Yom Kippur, so it includes the velas as well. So there you find the concept of Isad Koilam. Issa haboal yidei atzmoy lo yamrinim. And Issa that comes by itself, we're not going to say, oh, just because you make a shvua, I swear I'm not going to eat nevela and kosher food. You're going to say, oh, the shvua is chal, the shvua takes effect on the nevela. Because we have a rule, ein iser chalal iser. Once you have one iser, a nevela, you can't add another shvua on top of that iser. So therefore, since that's the case, Isser Koil will not work over here to make it an effective Isser or Shvuah. Says the Gemara, Bishlama Rav Shlokish, everything makes sense according to Rav Shlokish, Mishim Hachi Potter, Rav Shimon. Now I understand why Rav Shimon made it Potter. Why? Because Rav Shlokish's teretz is that your Shvuah was about a kol shehu. Really, minat Torah, less than a kazayis. Really, minat Torah, the Isser Nevela is only Asr in the kazayis. Comes along the Shvuah and says, you're making a swearing that it should take effect on less than a kazayis. But why does Reb Shimon hold that's not a good Shvuah? Because Reb Shimon holds that even minat Torah, Nevela is Asr b'kol shehu. That's why Reb Shimon says it's not a valid Shvuah, and therefore you're not in violation of the Shvuah if you eat Nevela. That's why Reb Shimon holds you're not violating the Shvuah, because the Shvuah does not take effect because the Nevela itself was Asr less than a kazayas. The Tanya we learned in Raisa, Reb Shimon says, Kol shehu l'makas, lo yomer kazayas el carbon. The concept of a sheer kazayas is only when it comes to a carbon. But really, the Torah asked, when it asked you, let's say, not to eat nevelas and treifas, it really answered a kolshu, even a little bit less than a kazayas. So therefore, you can't take an oath on something that's already awesome in a Torah. That's why Reb Shimon exempts. El Rabbi Yochanan, according to Rabbi Yochanan, my Talmud Rabbi Shimon the Potter. Why does Rabbi Shimon hold your Potter? Really, why should Rabbi Shimon hold your Potter? Because you should is once you said, I swear I'm not going to eat nevelas and kosher food. Since the Shavuot is chal on the kosher food, it's chal on the nevelas. So why would Rab Shimon say you're exempt? Answers the Gemara, Midihu Taimel Mishum Isakoilo. Because of this concept of Isakoilo. Isakoilo is the inclusionary Issa. So since it works this way, it works on the kosher, it works on the Vela. That would be the reason of the Chachamim. Rav Shimon L'Tamei, Rav Shimon is his own reasoning, the less like Isakoilo. He doesn't hold of Isakoilo. How do you see that? The Tanya, we learned in the Brisa. Rav Shimon says, if you eat nevela on Yom Kippur, you're exempt. A beautiful thing. Because nevela was also an Erev Yom Kippur. So it cannot be also on Yom Kippur because of Yom Kippur. It was already also from before. And you don't say, oh, Yom Kippur takes effect on kosher food. It should put an Isser on nevela. No, Ein Isser Chalal Isser. So we see quite an impressive thing. According to Reb Shimon, if a person has a choice between eating kosher food on Yom Kippur, which if he eats kosher food, he's chayiv kares, he should eat nevela. Because on Yom Kippur, according to Reb Shimon, if you eat nevela on Yom Kippur, you're only over a lav, not the Issa kares. Anyway, because ain't Issa chal Issa. So now the Gemara asks one final kasha and then slugs up this whole understanding of our Mishnah. So the Gemara says, I can understand that you could lavahen. You swear you're not going to eat. According to Shlokish, you swear that you're going to eat a kol shehu, less than a kazayis of nevela, and you could also swear I'm not going to eat a kol shehu. I'm not going to eat less. I'm not going to eat less than a kazayis of nevela, because kazayis of nevela is like heter food minatayra. You're allowed to eat it less than a kazayis. So you can say in the positive, negative, I'm not going to eat less than a kazayis of nevela, and you can say in the positive, I'm going to eat less than a kazayis. Because the key factor of making a shvuah, it has to be able to do it in the positive and in the negative. Rabbi Yochanan says, you could say, I'm not going to eat nevelas and kosher food. But how could you say, I'm going to eat nevela and kosher food? You can't say, I'm going to eat nevela. So since the shvuah is not chal in the positive sense, so since you can't restate the shvuah in a positive sense, so then it's not a shvuah. So again, we're back to square one. Here's the square one. The square one kasha is, how could the beginning of the Mishnah says, if a guy says, I swear I'm not going to eat, and eats oichlin that's not ro'yu la'achila, he's exempt. And then the Mishnah says, the guy says he swears he's not going to eat and eats the velas, he's chayev. The answer like Rava. Rava said, the guy says shvuah shloi oichel. A guy says, I swear I'm not going to eat. V'achal afar, he ate dirt potter. If he eats nevela, he says, I swear I'm not going to eat, and eats nevela, then it's chayev. Maybe because of sekoilol or whatever. But if a person says, I swear I'm not going to eat, and he eats dirt, then he's exempt. And that's the first part of the Mishnah. And a person, Omar Rav Mari says, Afanan, so we see from here that dirt is considered a non-food item. And therefore, the shvuah is not at all chal on something that's a non-food item. It could be chal on something that's an avail and treifel. Amar Rav Mari said, Afanan Amitanina, we learned the Mishnah like that. A guy says, Guy says, I asked my wife from benefiting from me if I ate today. Whatever. He asked his wife, even though he's supposed to give food to his wife, but he's saying, I'm asking my wife from to enjoy anything from me if I ate something today. And he ate nevelas treifas shkatzim roasam. He ate nevela and treifas. So now he's now his wife is asa. His wife is asa, but he didn't eat kosher food. He ate nevelas and treifas. So we see nevelas and treifas is considered food. and therefore his wife is also. So that's the same thing in our Mishnah. When is something not considered food? Like dirt is not considered food. So if a guy says shvuah shelo oichel and he eats dirt, he's not in violation of a shvuah. But if a guy says shvuah shelo oichel and eats nevela, then he is in violation of his shvuah. So the Gemara, Rav Mari said, it's another proof from another Mishnah. So the Gemara says, not so fast. It's not such a good proof. Hachi hashda, over there it's different. Hasam over there, first he ate the nevela treifas. Then he said, I make a neder if I ate something today. So since he ate nevela, he showed that nevela is a food to him. And then he swore he didn't eat, or if he ate, his wife should be asa. So then we go to Amid Beis, chashuvi achshave. He was machshev his food. Elahacha mi achshave. But over here first he said shvuah shelo oichel. He didn't say, so maybe he only meant, I swear I'm not going to eat kosher food. So, and nevela was never even part of the oath at all. So he never showed importance to kosher food. But so the Gemara leaves that as a question. You don't have a proof, but the bottom line is you still have an answer. When the Mishnah said shvuah shelo oichel and he ate food that's not edible, it means he ate food that's like he made dirt. If he ate dirt, that's not achila. That's why you're exempt. Shvuah shelo oichel and he ate veilus and treifas, then that's an edible food and you will be liable. Now, the Gemara says like this: Ama Rava. Rava says, we're going back to another thing. We said there's something called an Isser Koilel. Isser Koilel we saw before, a Nevela on Yom Kippur. First you have a thing that's Aser, Nevela, comes Yom Kippur, and since kosher food becomes Aser, so the Nevela also has like an Isser of Yom Kippur on it. So that's called an Isser Koilel. Koilel means it includes something that was Aser from before. So that's not so clear. Everybody holds that. We saw Rab Shimon holds who eats Nevel on Yom Kippur is not liable because he ate something on Yom Kippur. But even there's an opinion, as we saw, the Chacham hold, there is Isser Koilel. But then there's something called Isser Moisef. Isser Moisef means that you have something that's Aser. Let's say you have Chalev, that's Aser. Chalev is fats, you're not allowed to eat non-kosher fats. It's really supposed to be, if it's part of a korban, you bring it onto the Mizbeach. Now that it became Noisar, let's say you didn't bring it onto the Mizbeach and it was left over, then it becomes Aser to the Mizbeach. So a new Isser comes on this piece of fats. Not only is it Chalev, it's also because of Noisar. So because Noisar added an astringency that you can't even bring it onto the Mizbeach. So that's called an Isser Moisef. So it seems that Isser Moisef should be Chal, once you're adding an Isser, another stringency to it, so then you would say Isser Chal Isser. The question is Isser Koilel, would you say Isser Koilel, which didn't add anything different, just Nevela was Asr to eat, and now it's Yom Kippur, it's still Asr to eat. So, Amar Rava, my time on demand the Isser Koilel. What is the reason why the opinion of the Chachamim say that you do say Isser Koilel? Answers the Gemara, Midi Dahavar Isser Moisef, because it's very similar to an Isser Moisef, where you're adding something, another Isser, albeit by Isser Moisef, you're adding not just another Isser, but you're adding another side restriction to it that it did not have before. So therefore, Man de Potter, the one that holds, there's no such a thing of Isser Koilel, because he holds Ein Isser Chasel Chisel, the Leslie. He doesn't hold of that comparison. Because Ki Amar Isser Moisef, when would you say Isser Moisef? If it's one piece of meat. In other words, you have one piece of fats, and it was Asr because of Chalev, and now you're adding a new restriction on it because it became Noisar. As a Chalev piece, you could bring it on the Mizbeach. Now that it's Noisar, there's a new Isser on it, that you can't bring it onto the Mizbeach. So you can't eat this piece of meat for two reasons. One for Chalev, and one because it's called of Noiser. So if a person would eat it, he would get two sins to it, because the second sin added to the first sin. But with one piece of meat, with two pieces of meat, you won't say, since the Isser goes on this piece of meat, it will go on this food. In other words, since the Yom Kippur it includes kosher food, so now it'll include nevela, which is non-kosher food. You won't say that. That's the reason of Rab Shimon. Via Marava. Marava says, Man the Islay Isakoila. A guy who holds, you could say Isakoila. There's ways to create new Isura. So a guy says, Shvua Shaloi Oichel Teinim. He says, I swear I'm not going to eat figs. And then he said, Shvua Shlo Oichel Teinim v'anavim. I swear, the second Shvua says, I'm not going to eat figs and grapes. So now the second Shvua added the word grapes. So Migoy Dechayel Anovin, since the Shvua takes effects on grapes, Chayal Nami Ateinim, it goes on figs. So that seems straightforward of an Isser Koila. Says the Gemara Pshita, what is Rava telling you? So the Gemara says, Mahu Desema, I would have thought, Issa B'Me'elav Amrim. When do you say Issa Koilel? Like the Mishnah that discusses between the Chachamim, which is Yom Kippur, when it comes to the Nevela food. That's an Issa that comes by itself. So since Yom Kippur takes effect an Issa on a kosher food, so it takes effect on non-kosher food. But Issa Haba Ma'atzbay Layamrina, but you can create an Issa Koilel by saying, Shvu Shloichel Teinim, and then saying Shvu Shloichel Teinim V'Anavim. You're creating the second Isser. Then you wouldn't say, I might think you don't say Isser Koilel. Kamash Malon, you also say Isser Koilel. Since the Shvu takes effect on grapes, it will also take effect on figs. Says the Gemara, Mosav Rava Berei Rabba. Rava Berei Rabba asked the question. We have a brisa that says, Yesh Oichel Achila Achas. It's possible to eat one food. And you get four carbon chatas, and one ashim. In other words, if you did it by mistake, you chayiv 4 carbon chatas and one ashim. And the following are them: a tamei person that ate chaylev, v'hu noiser, and it was noiser. So it has already chaylev iser, and it's noiser. Min hamukdashim, it's noiser from hegdish. So a tamei they ate hegdish. So that's number 3, and he ate it on Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur. So you have 4 carbon chatases, if you did it by mistake, and 1 carbon asham because you chayiv milah for violating and desecrating kachim. That's the opinion of the Chachamim. Rab Meir says, and im hoysa Shabbos, and chaylev noisa, everything is chal because it's a boisef, it's a koilo. Rab Meir says, af im hoysa Shabbos v'yitziyot. If you actually it was Shabbos and you carried it out at the same time, let's say it was in your mouth as you're eating it, and you carried it outside, chayev. Because according to this opinion of the Mishnah holds, it's permitted to carry in Yom Kippur. So Rameir said, if it happened to be Shabbos, you'll be chayev 5 chatas for carrying. So the Chacham said, Einim and Hashem, that doesn't fit into the riddle. Why? Because we're talking about the eating alone causes chatas. Of course, if you mechal Shabbos at the same time for carrying, you'd be chayev chatas, but that has nothing to do with the eating. Now, v'im isa, if it's true that isa haba me'elav, you could add an isa koilo, mishkachas lachomish, I can make you another 5. Kagoin, she'ama shua shloi achal tamar v'chelim. You said, you added a swearing, I'm not going to eat dates and chaylev. So migoy dechayel atmarim chayel name chaylev. You say isa koilo works by isa haba ma'atzmai. So since this shvua would chal on dates, it would take effect on chaylev. So then you would have 5 chatas. So right, actually it's not a chatas, it's like a carbon oil v'yared. So you'll be 5 carbonas. So how come the Mishnah didn't say that? It must be it doesn't work. Isa koilo on isa haba me'atzmai. Answers the Gemara, not so. Ki kitani is about me'elav, is about matzah like kitani. The Mishnah is not discussing about you bringing on the Issa. The Mishnah is only discussing increases. It's only discussing things that come by itself. Like chaylev is a natural thing, noiser is a natural thing, mikdashim is so now the mikdashim. So the Gemara says, wait a second, very hegdish. Hegdish is unnatural. Somebody had to be magdish it, so it's Issa haba me'elav ebe'atzmai. Answers the Gemara, but bechar to kedushas beracham. They're talking about it was a bechar, so it was kaddish from its birth. So therefore, it's a natural type of isser. So that's why we didn't say, let's make a 4th chatas, a 5th chatas for making a shavua and taking effect by isser koil. If you want, I can tell you, kikitani midi the less le she'ela. The Bryce is only things that you can't undo, like you can't undo something that's chaylev. Shvua the Islay Shela, Shvua potentially could be undone by going to a Chacham in Matter the Shvua, like Tony. That's why the Brisa didn't count that. Says the Gemara Hegdish, one of the Yisurim that the person's violating is Hegdish. So the Gemara and Hegdish can be undone because Hegdish is a gift to Hegdish through a verbal consecration. So the Gemara says, we already said that this Brisa is talking about Bachar, which becomes Hegdish naturally. Iba Yisema, this is the teretz number 3. Kiktani, when did we say that you're in violation, that we're talking about 4 chatois carbon kavua, that you get 4 chatases, carbon oil of yared like a tani, but it doesn't talk about a carbon oil of yared. So that's why we don't count shvua. Says the Gemara, one of the yisurim, the 4 chatois, is a tame eating kachim, and you're still counting that. And says the Gemara, that Bryce is that Mishnah is talking about Benosi. You see, this is talking about a president of a shevet. A president of a shevet that eats kachim is not chayav a carbon oil of yared. He has to bring a regular sar. For Reb Lezahi, the Amad Nasi maybe sar. A president of a shevet that eats kachim, he brings a sa'ir, like as if he's violated regular chatas. Only a plain person who is a tamei that ate kachim, he brings a carbon oil of yared. A nasi just brings a sa'ir. And Ravashi says, Kikutana midi de chayla kashir, shvu de chayla pakas b'shir like a chani. Ravashi says that the Mishnah is only talking about things that have a shear, a certain amount. Shvua is a type of issa that you can make on any amount. You can make it on a crumb as shvua take effect. So that is not part of the Mishnah's reckoning. Says Gemara Hegdish. Hegdish it takes effect, and you're not allowed to violate Hegdish even less than a kazayas. And says the Gemara, Albina Shava Pruta, but you still, in order to violate Hegdish, you have to violate and desecrate something that's worth a penny. So there is a shear. But Shvua can be chal on something that's less than a penny and less than a kazayas. It can be chal on anything. Finally, Varavashi Ma'avira Amar Abzera, Kikatani Zadaina Kars, Zadaina Lav like Katani. Ravashi says we're talking about mazes that you get a karas, but mazes that you only get a lav, that we're not talking about. So Tommy that ate a chaylev on purpose, you would get a karas. Tommy that eats nicer, you get karas. So that's why we don't add in shvua, because shvua, if you violate the shvua b'mezid, you will not get karis, and that's why that's not counted as part of the counting. Concludes the Gemara, and we'll end in a half a minute. Right? Asham is doine lav. Well, you said the asham you violated for profaning hegdish. That if you do that on purpose, you only get a lav, and that's part of the counting of that Mishnah. And says the Gemara, we go on Amid Aleph, bechatas coming. We're talking about achatas. The chatas were all the noiser mikudashim and tamei shachal chelev was all something that b'mezid you get karas. And finally, the final teretz is Ravina Omar. Ravina says, Ki kitani, that Mishnah is only counting midi dechayla midi dvarachilahu. Those are food related isurim. Shvua, the chayla midid la barachila. Shvua could take effect. You could swear about things that are not food items, like Tani. That's why it's not counted. Says the Gemara, Hegdish the chayil name eitzav avonim. Hegdish could take effect on wood and stones, and we see that Mishnah is counting Hegdish as one of the Yisurim. And says the Gemara, El Kikitani, that Mishnah was talking about and counting the chayil amidid isbei meshasha. The only things that Isurim could take effect on physical items. Shvua, the chayla amida, the less b'meshasha, a shvua is a type of Isser that could take effect on something that's not physical. Because you could swear, Kagon she'ishan, I swear I'm going to sleep. Vishaloi ishan, I'm not going to sleep. So therefore, like a Tani, that's not part of the counting of that Mishnah. The bottom line is that there's no question against Rava. Rava's statement holds true, that if a man says, the bottom line is, if a man says, I swear I'm not going to eat figs, and then he says, I swear I'm not going to eat figs and grapes, that's Issa Koilom, because since the Shvuah is Chal on Avanovim, it also takes effect on figs. And for some reason, that Mishnah did not want to count Shvuah as one of the possible Isurim you could be over, for a variety of reasons. Okay, we're going to stop over here. Continue tomorrow.
Thank you.